GLP-1. You have heard the term, you have seen the tickers, but if you are not looking past the headlines at the structural capital flows, you are missing the single largest pharmaceutical market event since the invention of statins. Let me give you the 20-second overview. GLP-1 stands for glucagon-like peptide 1. It is a naturally occurring hormone in your gut. When you eat, it signals your pancreas to release insulin, tells your brain you are full, and slows gastric emptying. The drugs you know as Ozempic, Wegovy, Mounjaro, and Zepbound are synthetic GLP-1 receptor agonists. They supercharge that signal. Patients lose 15 to 25% of their body weight on these compounds. What started as a diabetes treatment has exploded into a weight loss phenomenon. In 2025, combined sales of tirzepatide and semaglutide hit roughly $76 billion. This year, Evaluate projects tirzepatide alone will generate $45 billion, making it the single best-selling drug on the planet, overtaking Keytruda. JP Morgan forecasts the global incretin market, which includes GLP-1s, will reach $200 billion by 2030. Morgan Stanley says $190 billion by 2035. 25 million Americans are projected to be on these drugs by 2030, up from roughly 10 million today. This is not a trend. This is a structural economic shift, and it changes the investment calculus across 5 distinct sectors. I'm Daniel Reed. This is Market Lens. Let's get into the data. Let me start with the obvious trade, because the divergence between the two dominant players tells you everything about how this market is evolving. Eli Lilly and Novo Nordisk both reported 2026 guidance in February, and the gap was staggering. Lilly guided to $80 to $83 billion in 2026 revenue, up 28% at the midpoint. Mounjaro grew 125% year-over-year in Q1 alone. Zepbound grew 79%. Lilly's tirzepatide now commands 60% of the U.S. prescription share. The company is investing $23 billion in manufacturing capacity across Indiana, North Carolina, and Germany. Their oral GLP-1, Foundayo, was FDA approved on April 1st and is already generating thousands of prescriptions per week. And the key advantage? Tirzepatide is patent protected into the back half of the 2030s. Novo Nordisk guided to a 5 to 13% decline. The CEO called the pricing environment unprecedented. Wegovy and Ozempic face patent expirations in Brazil, China, Canada, and India this year, countries that represent 40% of the world's population. Generic competition launched in India at roughly 1/10 the brand price. And on efficacy, the SURMOUNT-5 trial proved tirzepatide delivers 20.2% mean weight loss versus 13.7% for semaglutide. So the trade here is simple. Lilly is the market leader gaining share. Novo is the value reset trade, down 45% from its high, trading at 10 times earnings. If Wegovy stabilizes and amycretin, their next-gen dual GLP-1/amylin, delivers in Phase 3, Novo doubles from here. But Lilly has the momentum, the pipeline, and the patent runway. Beyond the two giants, the second-order beneficiaries are where the asymmetric upside lives. First, the clinical stage pipeline. Viking Therapeutics is a clinical-stage biotech with a dual GLP-1/GIP agonist called VK2735. Their Phase 2 data in February 2024 sent the stock up 121% in a single session. They are now in Phase 3 for the injectable and plan to start Phase 3 for the oral formulation later this year. They also have a maintenance dosing trial reporting data in Q3 of this year. If that data is clean, this is a $3 billion market cap company with a shot at a drug that could compete with Lilly and Novo. The risk is binary, but the reward if VK2735 clears Phase 3 is a partnership or acquisition from a major pharma at a massive premium. Second, the telehealth infrastructure. Hims & Hers has quietly become a distribution story in the GLP-1 space. The company signed a formal agreement with Novo Nordisk in February to sell branded semaglutide and oral semaglutide through its platform. When the FDA proposed excluding semaglutide, tirzepatide, and liraglutide from the 503B bulks list on April 30th, effectively blocking large-scale compounding, Hims was insulated because their Novo deal gives them access to branded product. The compounded GLP-1 market peaked at roughly 30% of total volume during the shortage era and is now down to approximately 15%. Jefferies expects it could halve again next year as FDA enforcement tightens and branded oral options hit lower price points. Hims sits on the right side of that transition. They offer branded product, a telehealth platform with low customer acquisition costs, and a growing subscription base. Third, the supply chain. Bachem, Polypeptide, and Corden Pharma, the contract manufacturers that produce the peptide building blocks for GLP-1s, are fully booked through 2027. Solid-phase peptide synthesis capacity is the binding constraint on the entire industry. If you want a pure-play way to bet on GLP-1 volume growth without picking between Lilly and Novo, the CDMO supplying both is the structural winner. And Catalent, acquired by Novo Holdings for $16.5 billion, now exclusively supplies fill-finish capacity to Novo Nordisk. That deal alone tells you how strategically critical manufacturing capacity is in this market. Now let's talk about the sectors being disrupted. If you are long PepsiCo, Coca-Cola, Mondelez, or any company whose revenue depends on impulse-driven snack purchases, you need to understand what the data is now showing. Morgan Stanley's AlphaWise analysis, combining prescription and credit card data across U.S. zip codes with high GLP-1 adoption, found consumers reduced spending at fast food restaurants by 8% within 6 months of starting medication. Grocery spending dropped 5 to 6%. Savory snack purchases fell 10%. JP Morgan estimates GLP-1 treatments will lead to $30 to $55 billion in annual revenue reduction for the food and beverage industry by 2030 to 2034. Consumers on these drugs take in roughly 21% fewer calories and spend 31% less on groceries. But here's the nuance that the market is missing. Full-service restaurants are actually seeing increased spending from GLP-1 users. There is a shift from convenience dining to experiential, quality-focused meals. And protein-forward categories are exploding. KPMG calls this the satiety economy. The winners are companies that lean into protein density, portion control, and functional nutrition. Nestle launched its Vital Pursuit line specifically as a companion for GLP-1 users. General Mills reformulated Cheerios Protein. Conagra put GLP-1 friendly claims on its Healthy Choice line. These are early signals that big food is repositioning, and the companies that adapt fastest will capture the demand shift. On the flip side, the medical device and medtech sectors have shown no negative impact from GLP-1 adoption. JP Morgan's medtech analyst noted volumes and pricing remain resilient. The concern that GLP-1s would reduce demand for bariatric surgery, joint replacements, or cardiac devices has not materialized in the data. Let me pull this together into actionable framework. The GLP-1 market is transitioning from Phase 1 to Phase 2. Phase 1 was defined by scarcity. Demand exceeded supply, compounding pharmacies captured share, and pricing power was maximal. Phase 2 is defined by competition. Supply has normalized, oral formulations are expanding access, pricing pressure is real, and the FDA is closing the compounding loophole. In Phase 2, the winners are 1. Companies with patent-protected, clinically superior products. That is, Eli Lilly. 2. Companies with distribution infrastructure that captures value from the volume wave. Hims and Hers, the telehealth platforms. 3. Companies supplying the manufacturing bottleneck. Bachem, the peptide CDMOs. 4. Food companies that reposition for protein-dense, portion-controlled nutrition. Nestle, General Mills, the early adapters. The losers are 1. Snack companies that rely on impulse volume. PepsiCo, Mondelez, and the salty snack complex face structural headwinds. 2. Compounding pharmacies without branded partnerships face regulatory extinction. 3. Novo Nordisk is not a loser, but it is the value trap until Wegovy volume stabilizes and the pipeline delivers. The most important number to remember from today: 25 million Americans will be on GLP-1 therapy by 2030, up from 10 million today. That is 25 million people changing their relationship with food, healthcare, and fitness. That is a demand shift large enough to reshape entire sectors. The GLP-1 revolution is not a story about weight loss. It is a story about capital reallocation at a scale we have not seen since the migration from mainframes to cloud computing. The only question is whether you are positioned on the right side of the reallocation. Keep your data sharp and your logic sharper. I'm Daniel Reed. This has been Market Lens.